The purpose of this session today is to explore not just wellness, holistic wellness. And today's guest is going to share eight, not one, two, or three, eight dimensions of holistic wellness, which even I'm going to learn. So, as much as you're the audience, I'm also the audience, and I am very excited for this conversation. The eight dimensions of holistic wellness. I encourage all of you to make notes, and I will be making some notes. So, let us begin the session for today. Welcome, Whitney. Whitney's from United States. She and her home is a holistic sanctuary, and no doubt uh, she's the one who is going to share the eight holistic dimensions, principles, the elements of holistic wellness.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this topic and to just chat a little bit more about, what is holistic wellness. I'm My background is a nurse practitioner, and I grew up in the westernized, version model of medicine. And it very much is about creating a diagnosis and treatment plan, even in school, kind of learning about that. But when I went through my own health crisis is when I realized that you can't just take apart one piece of things. You really have to combine it all together and look at it as a full picture. Look at the whole person, not just one little piece of them. And that includes your mind, your body, your emotions, your finances, your spiritual beliefs, your relationships. Each part of you is interconnected. And so, oftentimes we try to fix just one area without really addressing the others. And oftentimes when we do that, we miss the deeper root of the problem and to really be able to heal it. I kind of think of it like a garden. If you just water one flower and you expect the whole garden to bloom and create these beautiful vegetables or flowers or whatnot, it's not. If you're just watering it and it doesn't have any sunlight, it hasn't doesn't have any nutritious soil or some shade, if it doesn't have water for all the plants or the care that it needs, then it's not going to thrive and be this beautiful garden. It takes work and it takes addressing all of the elements of that, to really create that. And that's kind of what holistic wellness in my mind is. And that's what led me to create the wellness renovation framework, from working with clients and myself and, you know, being a part of this broken system of healthcare, education, culture. It taught us to ignore, our basic needs sometimes. And this renovation program really helps to kind of tap into those eight dimensions and really focus on getting to the foundations of being in that place of truth and alignment. And so I'm super excited to talk more about those eight dimensions of wellness. But I'm curious, what is your thoughts so far on hearing about kind of that idea of it being interconnected?
I think certainly this is a more advanced version to holistic wellness. As far as I'm concerned, most people talk about basically three things: rest, exercise, nutrition, and self care. So that is four. The most common things. I am
Mm-hmm.
curious to know, and I know that there is another element that many people forget to focus on due to career, due to the rat race, leisure, hobbies, leisure. But I will let you share so that, I could hear your perspective.
Yeah. So you had mentioned, some of the things you most commonly hear about rest, energy, nutrition wise, what we get in there, movement, exercise. Those are key things when it comes to physical wellness, right? But and it can also impact some of your mental wellness if you're not getting enough sleep or your nutrition and things too. But that's what I'm saying. It's not just, one dimension when it comes to wellness. We have to think about how it impacts all the other things. So let's break it down to these 8 different dimensions. And it's kind of like a blueprint of your personal wellness home. There's various different phases. So of course, the first one, physical. It's not just about working out or eating clean. It's also honoring your body's signals. Rest, nourishment, movement, and those things, they feel good. Um, the rhythms of sleep and wake cycles are very powerful when it comes to physical wellness. Especially for neurodivergent folks, whose brains just operate in a different way. The physical body can hold a lot of unprocessed sensory and emotional tension as well. So we see how that kind of can interconnect with the next one, which is emotional wellness. And so emotional wellness is your ability to cope with challenges, process emotions, hold space for yourself without judgment. Practices like breath work, journaling, therapy, simply naming your emotions can be really powerful, kind of starting off. And then we get into the next one, which is social wellness. So this can really impact your relationships, whether you're extroverted or introverted. We all need some form of connection. And in that social wellness, it's important to address things like boundaries, communication, being in spaces that really honor who you are. If you're constantly showing up to things that are draining you and with people that do not value you and are hurtful or harmful to you, that can really impact your rest of your well-being, your mindset, your emotions, all of those things as well. The other one I love talking about is your spiritual wellness. And it's not saying you have to be in a certain religion, but it's more so about living in alignment with your values. Whether it's connected to God, the universe, your intuition, or simply just a deep sense of purpose. What are you called for? Spiritual wellness really kind of grounds us when, life feels chaotic or out of sort. Those spiritual things that we can do to realign with ourselves, with our values, can be huge. And I am a big faith filled Jesus believer, and he is one that really grounds me during those times of going through tough emotions. And having that space to have that alignment can really impact how you show up and how you address the other parts of your wellness. The next one is intellectual wellness. And the intellectual wellness is about living in alignment, with how you grow and learn and challenge your brain. And this one's often overlooked. We do see it in like the 75 hard challenge. Oftentimes you're reading a book or doing something creative expression, doing puzzles, skill building, some kind of ways to stimulate your mind. You think about that when we think about Alzheimer's and how your memory can deteriorate. It's important to make sure we're stimulating those neural pathways to build and create that sense of possibility, to be able to see other things out there.
Would you recommend doing Sudoku regularly? Just a small question here.
Yeah. I think Sudoku is a great brain trick to be able to kind of shut off everything else that's going on intellectually, be able to match those numbers where they need to go and fill in those boxes. I think that's a very powerful brain stimulation, but it can also be a calming thing to get your mind off of other things and do something that gives you more. I love playing games, board games and card games, and spending time with other people playing games too. Even doing games like Sudoku or puzzles or things like that can be really helpful in stimulating that intellectual mind.
Actually, I should do this more with my social circle. Thanks. Let's go to number six.
All right, number 6 is environmental wellness. Where you place yourself, it is huge. It really affects your nervous system. There's been a lot more talk and hype about nervous system regulation and how that can impact you. Like today, I went out walking in my yard barefoot and grounding. Your home is your sanctuary. And so if your home is messy and cluttery and all a mess, and there's toxins like mold or other things in your home that can really impact your mental state, your physical state, and some of the other things when it comes to wellness. Even time in nature can just help to re regulate and recalibrate your mind and body. The energy of the earth, that energetic exchange can just create some calming and relaxation to help with your mental, emotional, and spiritual connection as well.
On that note, I would like to buy your home.
Well, it's
Let's
not
go
for sale right
number six.
now. Number 7 is financial wellness. Um, this one, I kind of ignored for a little while because growing up, my family had a business of accounting and taxes, and that seeing how stressed out they were, I was like, oh, that is not my jam. Um, but the more that I started realizing the importance of finances and having a plan and having structure, and I joined a financial company a couple of years ago, and I really got to open my eyes to other possibilities. The intellectual, reading other books, social, being around other people who are at a different money level than I was growing up really helped to expand my abundance awareness. But, finance isn't just about how much you earn or what your net worth is. It's about your relationship with money. Do you feel safe? Do you feel supported or empowered financially? Right now, I know a lot of people we've seen the stock market crash in the US, and so many people have that scarcity mindset. I mean, people have lost thousands of dollars in their retirement funds. And now they're like, I don't even know if I can retire, if I'm going to be able to live off this money. So, our financial decisions really need to be aligned with our vision and our goals. If we don't have that spiritual connection or intellectual connection of our finances, we may be overspending or not investing our money in what really is valuable to help us further what we're trying to focus on.
I'm now realizing the importance of all these. I think at the beginning of the session, I only mentioned the physical side. Now I realize, and what a fool I am. I thought I got 5 out of 8. That was, and now we come to the number 8. I'm excited. I'm very,
What do you think it is?
okay.
You mentioned it earlier.
Have I mentioned this earlier?
Uh-huh.
Okay. What did I mention? Uh, number
Your
one is
job,
two. Number two is,
your occupation, or your vocation. That's what number 8 is.
yeah,
And you,
just volunteering form of part of that.
yes, yes. That's why I call it vocational because it's not just, a job. It's what you kind of do with your time and the work and gifts that you have, how you can give back. It speaks to more of your purpose and alignment, more of that spiritual kind of connection that connects with it too. If we are out of alignment in the work that we are doing, if thinking about our emotional health, if in relationships, if people are overstepping our boundaries, if your boss is saying, hey, I need you to work overtime all the time, but not paying you for that, that can feel out of alignment, and out of your values. If you're doing a job where you have this gut feeling of like you're doing something wrong and it feels out of alignment with what you value. I know I struggled a lot with that, working in nursing. There were often times when there were other nurses, providers who would try to bully me into doing something based on orders that I'd gotten from a doctor for a patient. But I had to really step away from just following orders and guidelines and really look at the person in front of me and what was going on and seeing that bigger picture to be able to be an advocate and step in, for those people. I mean, there were some clients who, during COVID, I had this one guy who was super sick, and he was on the verge of needing to be ventilated. He already had a lung problem. He, they thought he had some issues swallowing, so they're like, well, we're not going to feed you. But they had trouble getting an IV in to give him some hydration. And here he is, like, not being able to be nourished. And, we talk about nutrition and how important that is when your body is trying to heal and fight off a virus. And here we are, we're not letting the guy eat. We're not giving him fluids. He can't drink anything or do anything. And we're just like, oh, well, sorry, like this is just, we don't know what to do. It's the beginning of COVID. You're just going to have to live through it. And I'm like, well, how do you expect the guy to live through it if he's not eating? So to really kind of advocate for him, okay, well, if you're saying he's not going to make it, then why not let him eat? So then he at least can enjoy eating and not be miserable. And I had to really fight against some of the protocols or different things that are going on. Luckily, the guy was able to eat. He was able to recover. We prayed together. We had various conversations with his family and some emotional support. So really approaching that more in that holistic manner. The guy made it. He never ended up on a ventilator. He ended up being able to be discharged from the hospital and go to rehab, which is just powerful because, so many other people, they did not make it during that time in the very beginning of COVID. And so I really think it had to do with really stepping in and approaching that in a different way. So kind of bring that all back around to say that, like, the work that you're doing, it really needs to fill you up. If you're stuck in survival mode and burnout and you spend so much time working, it can really start affecting your overall well-being. I really see this a lot in entrepreneurs because, you put on that solopreneur hat of many hats. You're doing everything all the time and still trying to juggle family and social life and your physical well-being and all of that. That oftentimes, if you focus too much on just your work, then you neglect your body, your mind, everything else. So it's really important, just in our day-to-day lives that we really need to be having more of a holistic approach to how we create wellness in our lives. And there are times when things may seem to ebb and flow, and you may be supporting your work stuff a little bit more than, your finances. You may be spending a little bit more investing in your business as, your finances kind of go down. But then as you get more value in that business, then your finances may go back up as you continue to work and maybe even learn ways to work less. When you start prioritizing your physical health, you can start improving your ability to show up more for your job or socially. If you really heal some of your childhood wounds and your emotional wounds, that can really impact how you show up in your business, how you show up in relationships, how you react to different things. That spiritual connection and your environment. If you're in this toxic environment and it's really created this unregulated nervous system, I see that with a lot of people who go through traumatic life events. When their environment is just shaken, like we were just talking about earlier in our area, we've had a lot of tornadoes and floods, and how that environmental impact has impacted, this the Kentucky Derby fireworks show going on and people being able to go socialize. It's impacting people's health when they have mold in their basements now or not being able to even access their home. Financial struggle through a lot of that. So we see how, when you start thinking about that, it's kind of like a big web that all of this interconnects, that all of these areas are really important. And it's not enough just to focus on one thing.
I noticed that during childhood we used to do all these things, and then as we grow up, the number seven, the financial wellness, starts taking over more, especially during the 20s and 30s.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, and for some people, it never, uh, those other four or five you mentioned, like social, intellectual, just never comes back. That is sad. Another question is, are all of these equally important, or will you place a little more importance to some of them? If yes, which ones? That's a
I
tricky
do,
question.
it is a tricky question because we talked about how they can all really interplay. But the three biggest ones that really, I think, make a huge impact is your emotional well-being. Because I feel like your emotional well-being and impacts your mindset and how you show up in so many other areas of life. The other one is your physical, because how your body is going to impact, how your environment is, how your finances is, how you're going to show up for work. So your physical health is a big one that is a part of that. And the other one for me would be really spiritual, because when you actually are in that alignment, when you understand your values, when you understand that helps to align your finances, it helps to align intellectually, it helps to improve your environment and regulate your nervous system. So to me, those are the three major ones. But I feel like, they're all pretty important because it all is so
Financial,
interconnected. Financial is
financial
another
wellness
big one.
also
Yeah.
big one.
But I think your financial is really impacted by those top three. If you're not in the right emotional health to be able to manage your finances and you're, in this manic state of wanting to spend, you're just not going to realize that you're overspending. Physical health, if you had, some kind of ailment happen to you and you're not able to work for a week or two, that's going to impact your financial health. And your spiritual health, what, values and alignments, that you're in can really impact how you make those goals and decisions with your finances. How do you invest that? How do you spend that? How do you save? It really goes along with having that purpose and those goals to really help. So I really feel like those three can really impact a lot of them, but I still feel like, it's all interconnected, and healing doesn't happen like a vacuum. You can't just suck up and clean up that that one area. If you eat perfectly and still feel drained because of your emotional or spiritual wellness being out of alignment, that can still wreak havoc on your body. I had a client who was 36 years old and he was, a vegetarian. He ate very healthy. He was a runner. He was in marathons, and he was, not very stressed out. He had a good paying job, financially seemed pretty well. He did just have some argument, with family because it's the holidays, coming up. And he went to run this marathon. And right after he ran this marathon, he had a heart attack. And you think like, oh, this guy is like doing all the things, right? And he has all the balance of all this, but it still wreaked havoc on his system. And working together, we were able to uncover there were some emotional things, going on. We also learned more about his genetic makeup and how his body has difficulty detoxing. And so when he was doing an endurance running, you think he's being healthy, he's running, he's doing the right things for his body, right? Well, it was really out of alignment with what his genetic makeup was. And so when he ran those marathons, as you run longer, your muscles start breaking down and it creates these toxins. And his body didn't have the right nutrients and support to help him get rid of those toxins as easily. So it created this cascade of inflammation that led to heart attack. And then that impacted him being out of work financially. That impacted him spiritually of like, well, why does this happen to me? I'm only 36 and like what is going on? His relationships socially, his wife was overly concerned and kids were overwhelmed, from what he went through. Intellectually, he wanted to know why this happened to him, and it kind of left him in this, I have to just, figure out what's going on. So we see how like it can, impact all of that. And so I think, that's the big thing that really drove me away from modern medicine and working in the hospital like I was doing, because I want to be able to make a bigger impact in people's lives by using more of this holistic approach, really seeing the person as a whole being made up of various different aspects of them, not just focusing on one specific thing.
And that's why 8 dimensions for holistic wellness. Do you realize now, if you're watching till this point, which I highly recommend you do, this is why it's 8 dimensions of holistic wellness. And wow, this session has been, I don't know, I got a new perspective. And I think final thoughts. I just want one message from you for the youth, university or fresh graduates, and one tip for the solopreneurs who are taking everything to their head, as you mentioned.
um, so you said one tip for people who are just coming out of school or
At university, school,
okay.
just
Yeah.
graduating, now
Hmm.
going to enter the,
The
I
real
hate
world.
to call it, but the rat race, the
Yeah.
the the age of financial wellness, only
Yeah.
financial wellness age that they'll be entering. And one message for the solopreneurs who have taken the whole world onto their head as a responsibility.
Hmm. So for those who are entering the real world after the fun times of being in the educational world, um, really focus on understanding your values and what feels in alignment to you. When you're presented with job offers or different things, don't just take the first shiny thing that's in front of you. Really make sure you advocate for yourself. Really speak up to what are those boundaries that you're willing, to give or take in that exchange. And really just having a strategic plan to know, what you're working towards in life and, addressing those different dimensions of wellness that help really guide you to those goals that you are working on. Keep dreaming and keep discovering those possibilities of what is out there, because at a younger age, you haven't been exposed to as many things a lot of times. So continue to expose yourself to different cultures, different, intellectual things to really help expand that possibility mindset. And then for the solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, in that journey, I think, the biggest thing is really focusing on, investing and your time and energy into what really lightens you up. Again, kind of going back to that spiritual, alignment and purpose, really making sure you are gut checking yourself with, is this, really in alignment with what I'm doing? So it really kind of goes both ways for both communities there. But I think, making sure you have a blueprint or strategic plan where you schedule time for social interactions with your family, friends, different things that you block. Time blocking is really great. Make sure you have specific times blocked off of your schedule to do things. One of my friends, we're doing a podcast series on burnout, and we were talking about, having that time, that break time, and every day from noon to 1 o'clock, he puts in his halftime break, and so that's what he calls, like, his halftime show. And what he does is he takes some time to nourish his body with food, to walk around, to just, calm things down, check back in with how things went in the beginning of the day, what he needs to focus on for the end of the day, and how he can show up. And then, having that separation of business and personal life is important. Even just having a desk or a separate area where you have your business going, where you can put on that special hat. Because I think when you merge it, like if you're sitting at your, kitchen table where you have dinners and meals with your family, sometimes that may be impacting, what role are you really in at the time. So sometimes having a separate area can be really helpful, to have that specific business focus, and putting shoes on.
Shoes on.
That's the Yes, put some shoes on. When you're in work mode, put some shoes on. Because a lot of people
Okay.
that work from home, they are like, oh, well, I don't have to get dressed. On Zoom these days, you don't have to have clothes or things on. But
Hmm.
sometimes getting dressed or putting shoes on, symbolizing you're going to work, and putting that hat on can be helpful. But then when you take your shoes off and you put on your comfy clothes, you're in home mode, kind of switch that up. So
No,
those would be
mm,
my
uh,
biggest
wear
recommendation.
shoes and no pajamas. Don't wear shoes on your pajamas also, because that's
I
too
mean, you could wear pajamas, but just having the shoes on, it does something to the brain that just makes it feel like you're doing something, you're going somewhere. It just kind of
yeah,
changes
subconsciously
that
it does.
perspective. Hmm.
Mm. Thank you so much. I think this conversation can go on for 8 hours, but there is a time limit. We should make some more sessions, and I look forward to creating a series. And it was truly a pleasure, a very enlightening experience to learn from you, to interact with you. And any final thoughts from you, Whitney?
Um,
Enjoyed this
yeah,
interaction.
yeah, just knowing, you are a whole system, and healing takes that multifaceted approach. And it's not just about getting healthy, it's about becoming more you, more who you are meant to be, and being in alignment with that. That is the biggest message that I would send everyone off with.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
See you soon.